everybody. Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Proud Skillworker. Today we have an opportunity to interview Sam Overturf, an Electro Mechanic who's been all over the United States with Skillwork, actually. We're going to jump into some questions from you guys that you guys reached out to us about. But before we do that, Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in skilled trades?
So I was a tool setter at a shop back home. And basically they got to where they were lower staffed. People started to retire. We started to see the higher turnover rate. They let me get into the trade, learned a little bit there. I did about a year and a half there. That was in Kansas City at a plant that made lawnmower blades. And then after that, I moved back home. So I worked at a ConAgra, and I did 3 years there. And then their contract was coming up to an end, and things weren't looking very good. So luckily enough, I found Skillwork, and here I am.
So tool setter in the beginning, that job kind of transitioned out. You ended up jumping into what role at ConAgra?
I was I started out as I was a lead processor. So essentially, in the grand scheme of things, I was a line lead, and
Okay.
they were pretty full at the time on mechanics. And then once the opportunity came, it took about a year. Once the opportunity came, I moved over into that, did some time there, and then I got a hold of Cam and came to Skillwork.
So as you transitioned from that line lead into the mechanic role, you said it was about a year gap. I'm curious to know, and maybe you'll answer here, is what was your biggest challenge in that season? In the season where you knew, like, I'm getting into maintenance, but I'm kind of stuck right here. Like, what was the biggest challenge there?
Honestly, I did notice a lot of challenge. Actually, I've taken this with me too, and I think it's kind of interesting actually, because having worked on the lines as an operator and done the day-to-day on it and gotten used to actually using the equipment, transitioning, a full year of that, transitioning into maintenance, it kind of became second nature, really. What I did as an operator translated into what I was going to do as a mechanic, to where, as an operator, you're not really digging into it, but you use the equipment every day. So whether it be like they use piston fillers for their sauce, the sauce dump into their bowls. So going from a line lead that adjusted that or moved the process, you know what I mean? I understood how it adjusted. So once I transitioned into the mechanic side of it, it really just it was deeper. It was just, honestly, I look at it as a deeper operator, essentially. And the more places I go with Skillwork, it kind of proves me right, really.
Interesting. So your time as a line lead was really more, and was building your maintenance career, because you started to understand, like, this is how it runs. So when it's not running right, as a maintenance guy, I'll know. When you were in the line lead position, did you feel that way, or did you feel more stuck?
Honestly, I knew it was coming.
Okay.
The supervisor, we're still buddies now, but it was basically in waiting in a way, like it was, what was that? That would have been about a year, probably right around a year before the pandemic came around. And we were just kind of stuck, but it didn't feel stuck. It was just kind of, hey, and it was, as I was a line lead, they let me, I slowly more and more got my hands on it. And then once the maintenance role came open, once I actually became one of their mechanics, it was just basically I hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's huge. I think one of the things you said in there is that open communication with your supervisor, and then even to the maintenance team, being able to have that and respect each other and just know, hey, next time there's an opportunity, I want to take it. That's huge for you and for others who are in the position you were in as line lead. Like, I'm getting onto the maintenance team. How do I get there? Like, knowing your goal and going, I'm getting there. Somebody's gonna let me go.
Sounds gonna happen.
Right. So next part of kind of what we're going to discuss, Sam, is we had a bunch of people reach out to us who are actually in the skilled trades, and they had questions for us. So we'll jump right into these questions. We have 4 or 5 that we'll go through, and from there we'll probably spider web out and have some pretty deep conversations. First question comes from Brandon A, and he says, how does he take his maintenance skills to the next level? And I think that ties really perfectly into what we were just talking about.
Yeah. No, it's when I was really kind of got to a point, after the first year and a half or 2 years and into being a tech, like what was, I didn't feel stuck. I just felt like the learning curve was slowing for what I was doing. So for me, it's just having the open mind I'm willing to learn anything, and that's, especially with something like Skillwork, that's huge. You have the opportunity to learn whatever you want to learn. So for me, it's just, even if I work around a piece of equipment and maybe I'm handling more of the mechanical side of it, I might pull one of the electricians to the side and say, hey man, how does this work? Like, what is the, what is the PLC logic for this? How does it translate? How does it go from step 1, 2, 3, 4? And that's how I do it. My short answer would be just to be willing to further your career, maybe in ways that you weren't expecting to originally. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll be working on a project and, I'm going to install the gearbox and put the motor in, and all of a sudden they have me, I'm doing everything else. So it's like, for me, it's just kind of, I'm open to learn everything, really.
Do you feel like when you reach out to people like that, when you're like, hey, will you show me how this, your example was a PLC and ladder logic. When you reach out to guys, are they usually like, yeah, I'd love to, or are people a little more standoffish with you in those moments?
It's funny you ask that, because when I first got into the trade, I was in ways told to be intimidated. It felt like, hey man, sometimes when you ask us for help, ask some of the guys, they're not really going to be so willing to lend that hand. And one thing that a lot of the older guys threw at me was, oh, it's their job security, which I heard a lot. And honestly, man, for my example, I'd say I've probably asked 25 different techs or electricians for, to help me understand something. And I haven't been shunned away once. Every time I've ever asked, they've always said, yeah, I'll show you. Give me a minute, or yeah, help me finish this and I'll come show you that. It kind of goes hand in hand. I've never had any trouble.
Interesting. So 25 for 25, no one's ever turned you down, but all you heard coming up was, hey, people are going to push back. People are going to push back.
Yeah, that's exactly how it worked. It's even funny now, because I'll see some of the guys that were, that are coming in, or they're just graduating from school, or, whatever it might be they're doing. And they're coming in, and I see some of the older guys that I work with every day, and they're like, hey man, like, just so you know, and then they're, they're intimidated. They're kind of scared of it. I'm like, that's not what they say it is. I promise.
Yeah, it's almost like there's this perception people want to hold in the trades where they're like, don't ask me questions. And immediately when you do, they're like, all right, I'll tell you everything.
I mean, honestly, from my standpoint, and now I'm in the position that, when people ask me stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, man, sure, I'll help you. Because you know what? And it may sound bad, but especially when you're on a busy day, or you're having a really, you have a packed schedule, when you teach that guy how to do something else, something that you might do every day that he didn't know how to do before, that's one less thing you have to worry about every day.
Many hands make light work. The more people you have who can do it, the less everybody has to do on their own.
Absolutely.
So you brought that up, kind of that perception of the older trades not looking down on, but feeling like threatening down. And Harris K has a question about, why does skilled trades eat its young, or why does it feel like it eats its young? So I think that's a really good tie-in for us to go, is that the truth, or is there perception out there that people are perpetuating?
I've actually got a couple really good friends of mine that are master welders. And when I would kind of go around the shop, I get a work order, let's say I get a work order to weld frame together or whatever it might be. And that was okay. It wasn't perfect. I did some time in high school with welders, but I would go from doing what I was doing to seeing what they were doing. And I was like, man, that is like, wow, yeah, that guy's worth his money. Holy smokes. And it went from, wow, like, that's kind of intimidating, man. Like, he just proved that I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. And it literally just tied into, hey man, like, I seen that you know what you're doing. I wasn't even able to get the full questions. I was like, yeah, man, come here. I'll give you the basics. And from there, you'll just branch out. You'll learn how to do it. But I mean, I could see where some people would say that it might feel like it eats its young. But from my experience, it's just the matter of getting, even if I'm, with Skillwork, like, I'm going from one place to the next, it's almost just like that new phase, that maybe, I mean, a lot of people don't consider, but to me, that's what it is. I don't feel like it necessarily eats its young, especially now, man. There's not enough young out there to be eaten. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's not enough people ahead of us. Like, we're the next force. And that's crazy too, because especially when I got here, man, their workforce here is so depleted. I'm in the middle of Chicago. I'll drive down, I'll drive down Arbor Road, and there's just signs everywhere. Help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. Or when I go to work, they're supposed to have on staff 24 mechanics, and right now we're at 8. You know what I mean? Like, I could understand that question more if it was 5 or 6 years ago, but I feel like as of late, the last couple of years, man, that's where the workforce has really fallen.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's a good point to stand on is, hey, 5 or 6 years ago, everybody was leaning into this. You need 4 years of experience. You need to have these degrees. You need to have all this OJT. And now everybody's like, hey, you get here and we'll train you. We're going to make you better. we've talked in the past on this podcast about that paradigm shift that has happened just in the last 5 years of requiring 2 to 4 years of experience versus now everybody is like, do you know what a screwdriver is, or do you have mechanical aptitude? Great, let's go to work. And
Yep.
it feels like the industry has flipped from the standard of the perception is they eat their young to now they're almost like, we'll bring anybody in because we need to grow this thing.
Yeah.
More and more people see it.
Yeah. No, just to tie in what you're saying. Yeah. It definitely does feel that way. And honestly, and I feel like a lot of places, I feel like that's part of it. And I also feel like part of it is, as it grows back, that a lot of different corporations are realizing, you know what, maybe this is the right way to go. Maybe if we do just give people a chance and let them get in the door and we train them who we want them to be, it pays off for us. Then they know the ins and outs of it. I see that a lot now too. Excuse me, several of the mechanics here right now, several of the guys at the place I'm at here in Bridgeview, they're like that. They were brought in as they were operators there for 4 or 5 years, and now they got a little bit of time as a mechanic or even as an electrician. People higher up, especially up in the office, they're like, man, this is working, so you see it on their, I see it on applications now too, where it's like, they're like, hey, a year ago, 2 years ago, it would even say, hey, 2 to 4 years experience, plus a trade school would be nice. And now it's changed. Like even just looking at an application, you can see that, I've seen several that say we're willing to train the right person, and
Right.
I feel like that's the right direction to go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, if we look back at the beginning and the previous industrial revolutions that we saw, that was exactly what happened. Is we started to go, we will train people and grow the workforce as opposed to try to find the perfect fit for every role, because that doesn't exist. We've talked more and more about this like fourth industrial revolution as we move to automation and we move to maintenance and we move to all of this predictive maintenance information. And I just think it's super interesting, the cyclical nature of it all. Like, okay, everybody needs 5 years of experience and a degree to, okay, now we're going to train everybody. But those evolutions take a long time to happen. They don't happen overnight. You can't convince people, bring them back to the trades, bring them back to the industry overnight. So definitely it's a long-term fix. But I think, as you said, more and more people are going, okay, I'm going to get into this at the entry level, learn everything I can, and then move over and kind of grow my career.
In the trade, in the industrial side of stuff, I don't think there's, you can get into management and move up and continue. But as far as just a stable position, I don't know if there's a position out there that allows more growth than being a mechanic, honestly, in the industrial environment. Right. There's so many, like even at work here, I'll go look through the job boards and there's just so many different styles of what they do. Like, learn, hey, here's a bump in pay. You can learn how to run the mill and the lathe. Here's another bump. You can, there's so many steps for different things. Learn how to wire in PLCs, learn logic. There's so many different pieces that allow you to move. It's like a crazy spider web is what I call it, because you can literally, in this industry, you can learn whatever you want.
Super interesting, because like the title mechanic is what you used, but from the word mechanic, you can go anywhere and make any amount of money you want you're like, yeah, I'm going that way. Okay, well, this mechanic does this. And I think that's a beautiful thing for the trades is have somebody who's like, I'm interested in this. And then 6 years they go, nah, never mind. I'm actually more interested in that. And you're all connected and you will have all of those skills, but your career keeps growing. It's
crazy to see it, to actually watch it play out and see how those can go. And sometimes it's not sometimes certain aspects of the trade aren't right for everybody. You know what I mean? Like I've worked with several guys that are, they don't necessarily see themselves as the greatest mechanic, but when you put them in front of a meter with a cabinet, you're like, wow, man, like this is kind of like the shoes on the right foot. Like this is something that's more natural to you. And so it's cool to see the way, as I work with more people and I work with different teams, it's cool to see how different people interact with each other and how they almost find a natural fit on a team. It's kind of like I compare it to like playing a video game where like everybody on the team has their own aspect. You know what I mean? Like so I can go work with my guys and like. We have somebody that's super good with a really good electrician, and maybe he's going through troubleshooting stuff, and he's like, "Hey man, I need you to put a contact here. I need you to replace this drive, this VFD, whatever it might be." And then we'll have somebody that's super good with gearboxes that can make anything work. So it's cool to see how those things play out when you tie it in together.
Yeah, and I think that leads us right into our next question, which is Shane A says, is it more beneficial to learn multiple skills or to be a master of one? And I think you're going to, based on the spider web you just described, I think we're going to have a decent conversation here.
I think, man, you can me personally, my goal over, let's say the next 20 years is to learn as much as I can, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
So with natural fits for me is a mechanic. That's just naturally what I do. Like I find it coming by me pretty easy. Not saying that I just walk in and know everything, but I find being able to learn mechanics a lot easier than it is to learn electricity. For me, I want to learn as much as I can about a lot, and then by the end of it, have one thing where it's like, you know what, this is what I excelled at greatly. Like, this is something that I've picked up on and essentially mastered. That's what I want for myself. So I would say to learn a lot about everything, really. Or a little about everything versus a lot about one.
Yeah, I think that fits really well into the team dynamic you described. Is more and more people are going to these maintenance team structures of, okay, we got a guy who's really good at troubleshooting, and then we got a really good maintainer, and then we have a really good electrician. So instead of one guy trying to do projects front to back, everybody does their part of the project, and it gets done more efficiently. It definitely gets done to a higher caliber because everybody's really dedicated to the part they're doing. Learning a little bit of everything helps. And then finding, as you said, your niche. Like your niche is, you called it a mechanic, but there's probably people whose theirs niche is, hey, sometimes I just want to be in a gearbox. I just want to be troubleshooting. I just want to have a multimeter and go to work and figure out what the problem is, and then have somebody who wants to deep dive it, go after it. That's not for everybody, but it definitely is. It's super interesting, this team construct that you talked about of a maintenance team actually being reliant on each other instead of all of you just being there to service individual crisis situations.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's kind of, that's, to me, it's really important too, because I would rather work on a team, and I've seen this happen in the past. I would rather work with a team where we're all really good, and then maybe, a lead tech spot comes open or they open up another supervisor role. I would rather us all be equally qualified for that position than I would have a team where it's not as coherent, it doesn't mesh as well together, and then you have maybe just one person that fits that bill really well. You know what I mean? I would rather us, to me, having a team that's just vibes well together, and maybe, of course, we all have our niche, but it helps when you have that niche and you're willing to move away from it. You branch off and we learn each other's stuff, maybe, which is I found that really common where I was before, is we all had what we did well, but we meshed well learning other things. You know what I mean? If we all grew together, that's something that helped.
My next question ties kind of right into that. Do you feel like people in the trades are trying to train people to take their own jobs? So when I say that, if you look at the rest of the world, if you don't have anybody who can take over your position or your job, you're probably not moving out of it because no one else is there to do it. So you have to train someone to step into that position so you can then step up. Is that a mindset you feel is prevalent on trade floors or is prevalent in the industries you've been in? Or are people usually pretty, this is what I do, I want to do this, I don't need anybody else taking my spot?
Well, a lot of times so far throughout my career, what I've noticed is there's not enough people. So a lot of times guys are taking, maybe whether it be a lateral move or they're going up in pay or whatever, they might be going to management. A lot of times they just don't have enough people to do that. I've seen several times where that's our supervisor and he's working right there with us, just because, that does happen generally, but he's, doing it for months on end because there wasn't somebody else to take his position. So he could move up and go on, but it's getting better. It's getting back to where I feel like where it was in that aspect of, oh, hey, I took this position. I got, this guy's got a 90-day probationary period. I'm going to train him throughout this time. Then I'm going to move up, and take my role.
That's right.
It's getting better. It's getting more to where it should be in that aspect. But honestly, I've seen a lot of times where there's just not enough people.
Yeah. And I think convincing people that this is the right move for them starts at such a different conversation point of for 2 or 3 decades, we told everybody you need a degree to succeed. And now through other avenues, other individuals, we're watching people compete financially and also professionally. Like you make just as much and you're just as happy doing jobs that, quite frankly, you don't have to deal with as much bureaucracy. You don't need a degree. You're not carrying college debt. You're just going to work and loving what you do,
Yeah.
and being significantly like financially stable as well. So I think those two things, there's a huge misconception around, if I don't get a degree, I'm going to struggle. No, you're not. Without a degree, you can still be incredibly financially stable and financially successful. So I just want to talk through like what your background is, like education wise versus OJT. Do you have any oh, hi doggy. What's your thoughts there on education versus just getting right into the workforce?
Honestly, I haven't touched a pencil in a college classroom once. I mean, just to be completely honest with you, I got into the industry at a time where it was getting weak. Not that necessarily the people were bad. It was just the people were retiring, man. You had old heads that have been at it for 35 years. Were like, yeah, it's time for me to hang it up, man. I'm done. So I got into it when they needed help. And from there, it's just on the job training. I've been able to, my first maintenance role, I shadowed a tech for 60 days to pick something up, learn some of it. A lot of from there on, it was, hey, I've got a drive that's throwing this fault at me. What do I do? And then I'd have an electrician come over. Hey, these are your faults. This is what it means. If you get this fault, if you get an overcurrent fault, check this, and it was just as time went on, things just stuck. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to further my education, because that's something I definitely want to do. I just feel like the idea of needing to go to school before you get into it is kind of overshadowed. There's different ways you can look into that. Okay, for me personally, I wouldn't want to go out and I'm going to throw out a number. I'm not going to want to go out and spend $15,000 on a college course and then go get into the field and not like what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause then you just pay, that's really common. Several people I've known through the years of coming out of high school have spent a lot of money on college debt that they're not even using.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I had seen before I even got into the field. It was very common to see people paying college debt back for careers they're not even doing. Yeah. So for me, it was like, you know what? I'm going to go give it a shot. I'm just going to go, like, what can I find? And I just started picking it up. I got in. I started out as an operator in a metal factory, and then I got into I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved into actually the Missouri Department of Transportation. I ran a concrete truck. I was like, you know what? Maybe did that for a little while. Yeah, I'm good here. And then that's when I got in, man. I went in, took a line lead position, got into maintenance, and then I just picked up a tool, and I was like, hey, man, I might not know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm going to give it a shot. And oddly enough, that mentality was something they respected, because these guys are like, man, if you're even just willing to try, that's better than the last 10 guys we had step in here. And that was just where it came from. I mean, would it be beneficial at this point to maybe have a degree next to my name? Yeah, it'll come. I'll do it eventually. I just don't feel like if you're asking me, is it a necessity to get into it? No, I don't. I think it would be foolish to think that. I know we got into for a couple of decades there, we got into the time where, you need these years of experience. You need to have a degree to get into this position, which don't get me wrong. There are times when that is definitely, relevant. But as a tech, or assuming whatever you're getting into it at the entry level, I don't feel like it's necessary.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Is find what you love and then pursue your education in that field. Don't get educated in something you're not sure you love yet. Sam, I appreciate you. I think this part of the show is kind of fun for me because I opened the door for you. I'm going to give you anywhere between 5 and 400 minutes, depending on how long it takes you. This is your soapbox. This is your opportunity to preach to everybody in the field, all skilled workers out there, and just go, hey, here's the one thing I wish everybody would see, or that I've learned that everybody needs to know. This is your moment to go, here's my calling for everybody. So take it over and just kind of, what's the thing for you?
Honestly, what we just talked about that ties back into, we did really good this time at that, but it ties into that very well. I don't think don't necessarily worry about education, especially in this field. You don't need that degree. Is it going to teach you in a classroom? Yeah. And that's happened to me personally. It's going to teach you in a classroom, but you're not going to, when you go out on the floor and somebody calls you to a machine, or if you're in the auto industry and you're working on different things there, you're not just going to be able to quickly recall everything you just went through, 2 years ago at that exact moment. So for me, on the job training is something that is crucial. It's definitely something that is getting taken less lighthearted now because, well, frankly, I feel like in this industry, that's because they don't really have a choice. Have I taken advantage of it in the aspect of I do it all the time? Yeah, because I mean, I annoy some guys I work with because I'll walk up, hey man, how does this work? They're like, really, dude? You've asked us like 3 times this week about different stuff. Like, yeah, but guess what? By the end of it, you're gonna have somebody that has a better understanding of it, and it's less work for you. So for
That's
me,
right.
it's just be willing to learn. That's a big one too. When I got out, let myself get out of my own head of being intimidated by some things. I just started picking up different things. Maybe a little here and there of different aspects of the job, and just let my knowledge branch out. And it's helped me greatly. Even in the last year and a half, it's been something I've learned things that I use every day. You know what I mean? Not you're never going to know all things, but I've learned more things to make my job easier. Especially when I first got into maintenance, I noticed, from day 1 to day 90, the times I had to call for help got fewer. And then from day 90 to 6 months, it was like, man, I'm kind of, picking up on it. I'm getting better at it. I'm not having to call for a hand, stuff I'm doing as often as I was. And then now I've had the opportunity to go into different places, like here at West Rock. I've been able to, as days have gone on over the last couple of months, I've been able to ask for help less, which tells me personally that I'm learning the things I should be learning. And I just feel like if I would have, I'm not going to say wasted time, but if I would have gone to school or, some kind of mechanical trade, industrial mechanics class before this, I would have got equal training in a classroom setting or, showing, maybe they're, and I've talked to some guys that are in school right now, and they'll go through courses where they're, they're rebuilding gearboxes and they're changing filters and whatnot, for a vacuum pump, and they're getting into the gritty of that. But I just feel like for me personally, the on-the-job training that I've received and things that I've been able to work through mechanically in the field itself has paid off faster for me than say a 2-year degree. Excuse me, while I'm already working. You know what I mean? Like that's just something personally for me that there's thousands of people out there, I'm sure, that feel the other way. I just feel like in our industry, what we're doing, that it's just on the job. I learn with my hands. That's the biggest thing for me. That's like, I didn't necessarily learn that at first. Like, I would sit in the meeting. I would be sitting in a meeting and we'd be talking about downtime. And I remember I had a supervisor that was like, are you picking this up? And I'm like, no, I'm going to be honest, I'm not. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm not. I just can't sit here and like listen to you lecture at me and then you ask me to recite all of it. If you go show me it, yeah, that's different. And it was cool to see. He didn't take that bad. He was like, okay, let's go look at it. You know what? Forget everything I just said. Well, I already have, but now I'm going to go show you and we'll go see it, go through it. And he's like, wow, that was cool to see. Like you learn differently than I do. So it's just something that for me, I would say be willing to learn different things than maybe even what you're expecting to learn. I've had that happen where I get into a position and I'm expecting it to be, maybe more of a, ConAgra was a great example. I was expecting it to be more of a teardown role. I worked third shift. We were responsible for tearing the line down, getting it all cleaned up, putting it back together. But I wasn't really anticipating the role of, they had what they called code red work orders, which is where you fix it on the fly and you go. I wasn't anticipating learning that much more that quick. Hands-on learning is one. Being able to be open-minded about learning different things more than maybe what you're expecting your job title to be. Those are 1 and 2 for me. I use them every day.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think throughout this, one of the things you've talked about is don't be intimidated and show initiative. And those 2 things kind of lead to what you just described are your catalysts, like your 1 and 2 is don't be intimidated, show initiative, and basically you'll see improvement.
You will.
In your day-to-day life. So definitely, huge bullets that you can take and give to people is, hey, here's the deal. Here, it's easy. Like you said, is do these 2 things and you'll be successful.
It's weird because I tend, and my wife will get, I not say argue, but we get in debates about these things because I'll get in my own head still to this day. I'll sit down like, man, like I'll have a problem at work and I didn't figure it out. And that burns me. I don't like that. I don't like to leave work and like, man, I wonder if they got that fixed yet. And I'll go home. I'll be thinking about it. She's like, well, you really let that eat you up. And it's like, yeah, because it went from learning a trade or picking up the beginning of it to and I didn't even notice it, but it turned into like this, like legitimately a career. Like I think about it, it's not, you know, I don't just leave work and it's gone. Like I continue, I enjoy it. And then I'll go into work, talk, you know, we'll go to our meetings and we'll talk about, hey, you know, yesterday it took us a while, but this is what we found. And guess what? You don't forget about it. You know what I mean? We go out on the floor, we look at it, we just go through it. But yeah, man, I'm just, don't be intimidated, have an open mind, be willing to learn, you know, like I said, more than maybe what you're expecting. Because you never know what might come down the road. You know, you might get in a position for 5 or 6 years. Company shuts down, whatever might happen, they open up a new role, whatever, you know, you might find something better down the road. And whatever you might have picked up while you were doing what you were already doing is going to benefit you there, which is, that's huge. And I think especially in our industry, a lot of times it gets overshadowed.
All right, Sam, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today, and definitely with all the skilled workers around the country. And a huge thank you to all of our guests, all of our subscribers, and all of the listeners. Please leave a comment, reach out, telling us what you want to talk about. If you're interested in being on the show, feel free to comment on any of the videos or any of the podcasts, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, any of those. We'll launch these every 2 weeks. So subscribe and be a part of the Skillwork team, be a part of the skilled worker team, and let's impact the country as we move forward. Thanks, everybody.